Very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome you all in today's webinar on the theme Exposure Draft on SQM-1, SQM-2 and SA220 revised. As recently, AASBS came out with 7 exposure draft on 7 standards. This is the first seminar on which we are going to deliberate. Our speakers are going to deliberate on SQM-1, SQM-2 and SA220 revised. And we are fortunate enough that we are having with us our Honorable Chairman of Committee on Career Counselling of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, CA Rohit Ruwatia ji. So on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my warm welcome to CA Rohit Ruwatia ji, Honorable Chairman of Committee on Career Counselling, as well as all the 3 learned speakers, CA Amit Mitra ji, CA Deepa ji, and CA Rajiv Saxena ji. We are also having with us CA Vasu Agarwal ji, Honorable Chairman of Ludhiana branch of NIRC of ICI. So on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my warm welcome to all present on this platform. So before we formally start and request CA Vasuji, I request our Honorable Chairman, Committee on Career Counselling of ICI, CA Rohit Ruwatia ji, for his keynote address. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you, Anil ji. So I welcome all the participants to this webinar organized by AASB ICI. The speakers of today's session, Deepa ji, Amit ji, Rajiv ji, and of course the chairman of Ludhiana branch of NIRC of ICI. So very good afternoon to all. I appreciate the efforts of AASB to organize various programs on engagement and audit, on quality control standards, industry-specific auditing issues, and other auditing aspects. AASB has recently issued exposure draft of 7 standards for public comments. The last date for comments on exposure draft is 25th of August 2023. So I would request every participant and every members to kindly put their comment on the exposure draft. These include exposure draft of the following 3 standards. The SQM-1, the quality management for firms that perform audits or review of financial statement or other assurance or related service engagement. SQM-2, engagement quality reviews. SA220 revised, quality management for an audit of financial statement. Some points related to SQM-1. So it is a revised standard which will replace extend SQC-1. As compared to quality control approach in SQC-1, this standard provide a quality management approach to strengthen and improve firms' quality management for all engagement. It applies to all firms and all services performed by firms, that is audit, review, assurance services, related services. It deals with the firm's responsibilities to design, implement, and operate a system of quality management for audit or reviews of financial statement or other assurance or related services engagement. It also deals with the firm's responsibility to establish policies or procedures addressing engagements that are required to be subject to engagement quality reviews. It prescribes 8 components of system of quality management, that is, the firm's risk assessment process, governance and leadership, relevant ethical requirement, acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagements, engagement performance, resources, information and communication, and the monitoring and remedial process. Coming to SQM-2, SQM-2 is a new standard. Earlier, the provisions relating to engagement quality reviews were covered in SQC-1. It deals with appointment and eligibility of engagement quality reviewer, engagement quality reviewer responsibilities relating to performance and documentation of engagement quality review. It applies to all engagement for which an engagement quality review is required in accordance with SQM-1. It is permitted on the basis that the firm is subject to SQM-1, that is, a standard should be read in conjunction with SQM-1. SA220 revised is a revised standard which will replace extant SA220. The revised standard clarifies and strengthens the key element of quality management at the engagement level. It deals with the specific responsibilities of the auditor regarding quality management at the engagement level for an audit of financial statement and the related responsibilities of the engagement partner. It is permitted on the basis that the firm is subject to SQM-1, that is, the standard should be read in conjunction with SQM-1. I am confident with today's session, today's webinar, with the speakers will provide justice to what the subject has been given to them, and we all will be beneficial by understanding all the related aspects related to SQM-1, SQM-2, and SA220 revised. So after the session, we can have some more discussions along with the speakers, and the comments from the various stakeholders are invited. So with this, I conclude my opening remarks I'm thankful to the AASB for inviting me to address August gathering. So thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Rohit sir. It was an amazing address. So before beginning and introducing the first speaker of the day, I, CA Vasu Agarwal, Chairman of the Ludhiana branch of NIRC. First of all, thank you all and welcome you all to such an amazing learning opportunity. As we are going to cover a very important technical aspect which we study, but as per what the feedback which we are getting from the various stakeholders, which we need to apply more and need to improve more. So today's topic will be SQM-1, 2, and SA-220 revised, and will be taken up by the learned speakers of the day, CA Deepa Agarwal ji, CA Rajeev Saxena ji, and CA Amit Mitra ji. So introducing the first speaker of the day, I would like to first introduce CA Rajeev Saxena ji. He's a chartered accountant and a partner with SN Dhawan and Company LLP. He has more than 2 decades of experience in handling various numerous engagements on matters relating to statutory audits as per IGAP, Ind AS, tax audits, uh, various project management and implementation financial audits under USAID and as per IFRS US GAAP. He has also handled various international assignments, including development projects audit conducted for the European Commission, audits for the World Bank, and has a very large exposure in due diligence and business valuation engagements. He is also a member of the FRRB subgroup New Delhi 2 in 2018-19. He is also presently a member of the ICA study group on SQM-1, 2, and SA-220 revised. So, so Rajiv sir, I think I will give the stage to you now.
Thank you so much, Vasuji. Thank you. And thank you, Rohitji, for excellent opening remark. I will just share the screen. And let me know when you can see the screen, please.
Yes, sir. Fine, sir. Make it full screen, sir.
I will. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much again, once again, AASB for giving us this opportunity. And coincidentally, all three of us who are my learned speaker, co-speaker Amit and Deepa, we were all together while part of the study group who supported this project of ISQM-1, ISQM-2, or SQM-1, SQM-2, and SA-220 revised. We worked quite comprehensively and extensively on this project, and I'm glad that the exposure draft has already been issued. So I will take you through some of the key highlights of the SA-220. However, the standard is designed in a way that ISQM-1 is the mother standard, which is replacing SQC-1. The new standard, which one of the introductory remark mentioned that it is a new standard which was earlier subsumed a part of SQC1. Now, strong focus has been given on the engagement quality control. And third, which is SA-220, which is being covered by me, is an existing standard, revised and updated to align with the requirement or the ethos of ISQM-1, which is more on the line of overall quality control, holistic quality control. Maybe if I can say that it is much more in expectation than our existing SQC1. And my learned speaker Deepa and Amit will talk about that in detail. So if I talk about the overall framework, so ISB released three standards together, which is ISQM-1, which was previously ISQC-1. ISQM-2 is the new standard, as already been mentioned, and ISA-220 or SA-220 in our case has been a revised version of ISA-220. I think the very objective of releasing these three standards together is to promote robustness and proactiveness in quality management. And I think the concept of scalability has been very, I think, efficiently covered and in these standards, so that these standards can be applied by firms of each size. I think SQC1 was found to be difficult or too complex for smaller firms to implement. But I think these three standards has made it possible in terms of scalability, so that firms of each size can easily and efficiently implement the expectation of these quality standards. Uh, so if I correspondingly, ICI has issued the exposure draft of the 4 standards, which is the topic of the session today. Why this new standards have been issued? I think to encourage proactive quality management at firm and engagement level, foster an appropriately independent and challenging skeptical mindset of the auditor, enhance documentation of the auditor's judgment. I think this is the key importance of this standard, and keeping the ISAs or maybe essays fit for purpose, actually, because in the changing economic and regulatory environment, it is the responsibility of the regulator, which is the AASB in this case, to make sure that the standards are providing necessary guidance and support to our members in order to deal with the expectation of the present environment. So these standards are taking care of that, and these have been designed to be fit for the purpose. If you talk about the relationship of these 3 standards, while SQM-1, which is the mother standard, is the quality management at the firm level, requires the firm to design and implement and operate quality control management. SQM-2, which is the new standard, it is the quality review procedures. So Amit will talk about that detail in later. And SA220, which is the quality management at the engagement level, this was an existing standard, but it has been revised to align with the requirement of these 2 standards, which is SQM-1 and SQM-2. So this deals with auditors' responsibilities regarding quality management at engagement level and the related responsibility of the engagement partner. So this applies to audit of financial statement. If I give an overview of this standard, this clarifies and strengthens the key elements of quality management at engagement level, focuses more on the role of engagement partner in managing and achieving quality on audit engagement. Maybe you will see in the subsequent section that the role and responsibility of the engagement partner, I would say with the implementation of these standards will be enhanced to a significant extent. I think the expectation from the engagement partner is definitely is at the next level. Encourage proactive management of quality at the engagement level. Keep the standard fit for purpose in wide range of circumstances. Emphasize the importance of professional skepticism, which is the core of audit, and enhance the documentation of the auditor's judgment. I think I would emphasize that there is a key focus on how auditors have arrived at the judgment and accordingly drawn the comfort which was needed to issue an opinion on the financial statement. So judgment at each of the financial item, how those have been arrived at, how those have been documented. There's a strong focus on an audit documentation to support the audit judgment. The key highlights are this increases the responsibility of engagement partner, as I mentioned, modernizes the current standard for an evolving environment, which includes the information technology, including changes made to the definition of engagement team to recognize different and evolving engagement team structures. New with the advent of these, taking support from a center of excellence, more and more firms are using centralized process for basic audit procedures. So those decentralized team become part of the engagement team. So they also comes under the purview of the control of the engagement partner, and they have to monitor the quality of those teams as well. So there are, we'll be discussing that in detail. There's new material on importance of professional skepticism and professional judgment in performing audit engagement. Scalability, as I mentioned, the standard is intended to be applied in the context of the nature and circumstances of each audit. It highlights the growing role of technology in audit financial statement, wherein resource section have been enhanced to include technological and intellectual resources, as well as in addition to the human resources involved in audit engagement. So the deployment of all those tools, artificial intelligence, data analytics, that has been very adequately covered in this standard, and how should that form part of the audit, and what is the responsibility of the engagement partner while deploying those tools and technologies. And this clarifies the relationship between SA 220 and the standards on quality control management, which will be covered by Learned co-speakers. When we talk about scope and applicability, this deals with the specific responsibility to the auditor regarding quality management at the engagement level for an audit of financial statement and the related responsibility of the engagement partner. This essay is to be read in conjunction with the relevant ethical requirements. If we talk about applicability, while globally it was made applicable last year, but for us, the exposure draft has been issued now, which is available for comment till 25th of August. And accordingly, the applicability will be notified by the competent authority in due course. If you look at the objective of this standard, uh, to manage the quality at the engagement level to obtain reasonable assurance that the quality has been achieved such that the auditor has fulfilled the auditor's responsibilities and has conducted the audit in accordance with the professional standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. And the auditor's report issues is appropriate in the circumstances. So this is the very objective of the very basic objective, but it is very comprehensive and very deep in terms of responsibility as regard the engagement partner responsibility goes. If I talk about the key changes in SA 220 revised, so the engagement partner's overall responsibility to manage and achieve quality at the engagement level through his or her sufficient and appropriate involvement throughout the audit engagement. Uh, so, so, so there are three kind of responsibilities: leadership responsibilities, direction, supervision, and review. And last, but not the least, is stand back. So, what is leadership responsibilities? Increase emphasis on the leadership responsibility of the engagement partner in managing and achieving quality at the engagement level. So, which is starts from the right from the risk assessment to planning to deployment of team with the adequate experience. So overall leadership on the engagement is entirely the responsibility of the engagement partner. Direction, supervision, and review. Engagement partners responsible for determining the nature, timing, and extent of direction. If they have to do a weekly review, bi-weekly review, daily review, depending on the complexity of the engagement. So that is entirely the responsibility of the engagement partner and has to be preconceived and pre-planned in detail. Extent of direction, supervision, and review in light of the engagement circumstances. And a stand back, which is very important. So engagement partner shall be satisfied that his or her involvement has been sufficient and appropriate to provide basis for taking overall responsibility. If he or she feels that something was missing and that has to be redone, or maybe certain more procedures or process has to be implemented in place if the time permits. Sometime it is not possible because of the paucity of time and the deadline, but maybe they have to make sure that their involvement has been enough to be able to take the overall responsibility on the engagement. When we talk about scalability, the revised standard includes introductory materiality on scalability, as the standard is intended to be applied in the context of the nature and circumstances of each audit, whether big or small. The intention behind adding this paragraph is that the revised standard can be applied by firms of all sizes. As I mentioned earlier, SQC-1 was posing challenges for the small firm, but this standard takes care of that scalability aspect and can be easily applied by firms of all sizes. SA 220 revised lists certain paragraphs that highlight how the revised SA can be applied in different circumstances. So there are relevant paragraphs in 13 and 14. For example, some of the requirement of this standard may not be relevant in case of a auditable less complex entities. So as they might be conditional upon the involvement of other members of the engagement team, how to deal with these situations have been dealt with in this standard. Engagement partner is required to take into account information obtained in the acceptance and continuous process in planning and performance of the audit engagement. Recruitment and application material are more requirement and application material are more explicit about what the engagement partner needs to review, including a listing of examples of significant judgment in relation to the audit engagement. Engagement team, if we talk about that, so I think there's a change of definition of engagement team, which we'll talk about in subsequent slides. So SA 220 revised clarifies that ordinarily the engagement team may depend on the firm's policies or procedures, unless the engagement team's understanding or experience indicate that the firm's policies or procedure would not be effective. and information provided by the firm or other indicate that the firm's policies or processes are not operating effectively. In which case, maybe if there is a recent review which has said that certain policies are not working effectively, and despite knowing that the engagement partner chooses to still follow those policies in terms of engagement team, then it is entirely responsibility of the engagement partner to defend that kind of situation, because it becomes his holistic responsibility to deal with this situation and accordingly take necessary safeguards and mitigate those risks which are not addressed by the firm's policies and procedures. This approach avoids the risk that the engagement team blindly relies on the firm's system of quality management without applying its own recent experiences or judgment on that. So this is far-reaching in implication, and has to be understood with the same seriousness. If we talk about professional skepticism, this revised standard includes new introductory material on importance of professional skepticism and professional judgment in performing audit engagement. Application material sets out the example of impediments to professional skepticism, which includes common threats and biases, conscious or unconscious, and suggestions as to possible action the engagement team can take to mitigate these. Engagement resources deals with modern auditing environment, including the use of different audit delivery models and technology. Resources have been expanded beyond human resources to include technological and intellectual resources. Definition of engagement team, as I mentioned, changes in the definition recognizes the definition has undergone a change, and we'll talk about this. Regardless of where individuals are located or how they are related to the firm, if an individual is performing audit procedure, then he or she is to be appropriately directed and supervised and the work reviewed in accordance with SA-220. I'll give you an example. During COVID period, when it was not possible for us to send the teams for observation of inventories and other related procedures, we were using maybe our network teams or our network firms to help us in that process because travel was not possible. This may be an extreme example, but even this, if we stick to that example, so that team of a separate firm or a separate set of people who are supporting you in that process becomes part of the primary engagement team, and it becomes the responsibility of the engagement manager to appropriately direct and supervise the work of such teams. Similarly, as I mentioned, more and more firms are setting up center of excellence for basic audit procedures with nil or minimal judgment. And in that case, if you are using people from that team, that becomes the member of the primary engagement team, and it becomes the responsibility of the engagement partner to direct and monitor and supervise the work of such teams. So engagement team definition, if I talk about, the definition in SA-220 revised, all partners and staff performing the audit engagement and any other individual who perform audit procedure on the engagement, excluding an auditor's external expert, which are covered by SA 620, I'm sorry, and internal auditors, which are covered by SA 610, who provide direct assistance on an engagement. So leaving these two or barring these two, all other members or individuals who become part of the engagement team and perform audit procedures on the engagement gets covered into the definition of engagement team, and it becomes the responsibility of the engagement partner to direct and supervise their work. How this definition is different from the existing SA-220. So as per existing SA-220, the definition of engagement team includes expert contracted by the firm. So if we are using non-accounting professional, as part of the engagement team, the existing SA-220 used to cover them in the definition of engagement team, whereas the ISA-220 earlier also and the revised one does not cover these experts as part of the engagement team. And in SA-220 revised, it has been made consistent with ISA-220, more so because earlier code of ethics, ICA code of ethics, was aligned with this definition of including experts contracted by the firm. But the revised code of ethics of 2019 is more aligned with this exclusion, and therefore inclusion of or exclusion of auditors external expert from the definition of engagement team now is aligned with both ISA 220 revised as well as ICI code of ethics. We come to the documentation. There is a focus on documentation, which I discussed earlier also, on the audits to make sure of the engagement partner that all his significant judgments are well documented. The revised guidance on engagement partner involvement in the audit could be evident and emphasize on documentation of the auditor's consideration of judgment, such as circumstances that may risk to achieving quality on the audit engagement. Other important which I would like to highlight would interaction with SSIT, which is in how the requirement in 220 and other essays are to be applied in group audit. Because if you are principal auditor, then probably in the intermediate standard that also becomes
Hello, Vinu. Vinu, I think the GFG has disconnected, and yeah, there was internet. GFG, can you hear me? Hello.
yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, I think if you can start again.
Yes, he's
The
still
last.
there. His
No, he has joined again, I think.
yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
this also integrates a new quality
Sir,
management
I think you have to
concept in
share the screen.
SQM1 and SQM2.
Sir,
So
share
that
the
such
screen again if
concept.
possible. Ajivji.
Okay.
Also, I think there's some network
Yeah,
issue.
so I think, sir, if you can just finish without the PPT also, that would be okay. And so you were, I think, on the last slide only, Rajivji.
On the slides, right? Last, yes.
So I think maybe just finish it. I think better it will be better because you are. I think you are having some internet issues. So it would be better if you can just finish without that only.
Yeah. So already last slide mentioned that other important point is aligned with SS600 and the alignment with integration with SQM1 if co-speakers. So that is all from my side on SA220. So it is a little far-reaching in implications as compared to previous one. Brings up more responsibility on the engagement partner and probably and at the same time provide reasonable guidance to the partner how to deal with different critical situations, how to scale it up, scale it down, and accordingly this can be applied on all engagement by firms of each sizes. So thank you so much for this time, and be happy to answer any question which the participant may have over the email. Uh, uh, and I hand it over to back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Anilji, there is one question. Should we just get that question done away with right now only, if possible?
Yes, sir. Only one question is there. We can take this question,
Sir, so we have received
and
one
that is
question
also
for you,
relating
sir.
to the risk assessment or risk part only.
Yeah. So the question is asking how to take up firm a risk assessment process in the firm. Please list some of the quality risks to identify for the firms. Please list some quality risks to identify risks applicable to the firms. So basically is asking जब हम फर्म का रिस्क असेसमेंट करते हैं तो उसमें कुछ कैसे करें और कौन से बड़े रिस्क होते हैं फर्म के लिए बेसिकली जो मेरे को अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो रही है
Formal risk will definitely covered by the presenter that is one. I'm sure she would help participant understand the overall risk assessment at the firm level.
Okay. So I think we should move on to the next speaker then, Anilji.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Kindly, kindly. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Rajiv, sir, for
Thank you,
sparing your
Rajiv ji.
valuable time and enlighten all of us on various intricacies on this exposure draft on SA 220 revised.
Thank you so much for
So
this
thank you, Rajiv.
opportunity,
Yes,
Raji.
sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sir. Thank you,
Vasu sir.
sir.
Thank you.
For your
Thank you.
excellency of work, Rajiv sir has to leave.
Thank you,
So,
Amit. And
I think his
yes, sir.
internet
Yes,
is not working.
yes, sir.
So I
Yes, sir.
think we'll
Internet is not
continue with the
working on
session.
that side. Chairman, sir, kindly
Yeah.
proceed further and
Yeah, so I'll
invite
just move it
our
along. Yeah, yeah.
second speaker,
Sure,
sir.
sure,
Yes,
sure.
sir. Please, sir.
So thank you, Rajiv ji, again for the wonderful session on SA 220 revised. Now calling on to the next speaker, CA Deepa Agrawal ji, who will be taking up topic of SQM-1. So Deepa Agrawal ji is a Bachelor's of Commerce and a fellow chartered accountant of the institute. She is a rank 13 holder all over India and also fifth rank holder in NIRC. She has almost 2 decades of experience in national and multinational companies in areas of auditing and accounting. And she has also recently completed her CPA Australia. So congrats to you, ma'am. She is also a qualified DISA and also qualified on the certificate course of IFRS from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. She has worked with the technical directorate of ICI for 5 years and has assisted ICI in various publications such as Guide on Audit Trail, Auditing Standard Checklist, Working Paper Templates, and Guidance Audit Caro, Background Material AS60. And she has been working with renowned consultancy firms since the last 16 years and today and currently is a partner in SR Bartley and Company LLP. And she is also a special invitee to the ASB of ICA and has been a member of the Accounting Standard Boards and special invitee to various committees of the ICA. And ma'am, over to you, ma'am, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasuji, and thanks to all of you, and thanks to AASB for giving me another opportunity. I think Rajiv has broadly covered the overview of these standards. So I'll just quickly share my screen and we'll take you to the standard directly. Yeah. Is my screen visible? If you can confirm.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. This is well.
Okay. So thank you. So I think Rajiv explained very well about the three standards, why these standards are being issued together and why these are relevant. And I also got this opportunity to work with Rajiv and Amit as part of the study group when these standards were being deliberated at the AASB. So if I just talk broadly about ISQM-1, which is like the international standard, and now the exposure draft has been issued for the Indian version of the standard on quality management. Yes, it is a mother standard because this is actually raising the bar for quality management. The three new and revised proposed standards on which AASB has sought your comments, and the comment last date, as Rohitji mentioned, is 25th August. This is to make sure that the audit firm's approach to quality management is modernized and is kind of strengthened. So through these standards, the IAASB is addressing an evolving and increasingly complex audit ecosystem, including growing stakeholder expectation and a need for quality management system that are proactive and adaptable. So what I'm going to cover in the next 45 minutes is about the entire quality management system. It's moving away from the policies and procedure, and rather than setting out the entire quality management system by adding new components to the existing what we have seen in SQC1, and also enhancing the existing component, and talking about the ongoing ongoing monitoring and remediation on a proactive basis to make sure that any deficiency in the controls or in the quality management system are identified at the right time and are also remedial action is taken by the firm. So this is a very, very comprehensive standard, and I'm sure 45 minutes are too less to cover this standard, but I will try and give you some of the important messages and would urge you to read the standard, the application material, which is given after the end of the standard, and then give your comments so that you understand how much work is involved, what is the expectation of the regulator when it will be implemented to the for the firms. And as Rajiv mentioned, at various places, data scalability is there in all these three standards. The standard can be adapted basis the time, basis the size of the firm. the engagements being led by the firm. So if I just talk about what I'm going to cover is about the change in professional standard very briefly, because Rajiv has already covered that. And then I'm going to talk about the applicability, the scope of the standard, why SQM-1 has been issued, the SQM-1, the exposure draft of the SQM-1, and what are the new component and what is the change in the existing component if I compare with SQC-1. The network requirements. So Rajiv mentioned about the network requirement. So that is also recognized in the standard that it is very much possible that you might be using the controls of the network firm with which you are affiliated, or it might be possible that a firm may not have all the resources and they are seeking out services from an external service provider. So that is also covered in the standard, and they talk about what kind of principles you have to follow whenever network firm or network services are being used by you as a firm, and when the service provider services are being used. And then it talks about the continuous and ongoing evaluation of the system of quality management. And last but not the least, on the documentation. So the standards were issued, and so to address the key public interest issues. So I think I'll just skip away the slide and move to the standard and quality management. So this is something which is, it is talking about the quality management approach. And this SQM-1 firms are required to design a system of quality management to manage the quality of engagement. So the focus is to enhance the quality of engagement performed by the firm. SQM-1 is, if I compare about with the existing SQC-1, there are substantial revisions by requiring a more proactive and tailored quality management approach. It requires firm to transition from simply having policies and procedure. So like you apply internal controls and you talk about the SOX reporting, it's the entire system of the quality management which will be required to be implemented once the standard is effective. It modernizes the current standard for an evolving and increasingly complex environment. So it talks about increasing use of technology in your procedures. Everyone is using so many tools. Even ICA has kind of issued so much guidance on that. Interactions of the network and member firms and use of external service providers. So there are new requirements for the information and communication. There are enhanced requirements for monitoring and remediation to promote more proactive monitoring of the system of quality management, in short, SOQM as a whole. So the interplay with the three standard, I think that is already being covered, by Rajiv. So I will just skip the slide, and SQM-2 will be covered by Amit. On the scope and applicability, so SQM-1 applies to all the assurance services. So it applies to the audit, it applies to the review of the financial statement or other assurance or related service engagement. If the firm is providing any of these engagement, which means audit, review, or any other of compilation or agreed upon procedures engagement, then the standard will be applicable. So what does it mean? It means that if there is some other engagement being done by the firm, for example, the tech services or consulting services, the SQM-1 will not be applicable to such engagements. However, one should also note that SQM-1 may affect operational areas of the firm. And when I say operational area, it means, for example, the IT and human resources, other engagement that are not performed under the AASB's engagement standard, or personnel in the firm who are not involved in performing engagement under the AASB's engagement standard, this will still be required to, may have an interlink when I talk about the resources. Because SQM-1 does not view quality management as a separate function of the firm. Instead, in order to enhance the effectiveness of quality management, SQM-1 promotes integrating the entire quality management into the culture of the firm, which means it has to be embedded into the culture of the firm's strategy, operational activities, and business processes. In order to fulfill law, regulation, or relevant ethical requirement, the firm's SOQM may need to address other areas of the firm. So this is something one has to keep in mind. While the standard is applicable only to the assurance services, the other elements will also be required to be considered. The effective date is not specified in the exposure draft. If you see, the exposure draft talks about system of quality management in compliance with this ISQM SQM are required to be designed and implemented by so-and-so. So the date is yet to be specified. So a date will be specified by the AASB once the exposure draft is, the comment period is over, comments are considered, and the final standard is issued by the AASB. Evaluation of the system of quality management required to be performed within 1 year. So this is something very, very important to note. So while the firms will be asked to implement the system of quality management in compliance with SQM-1, they will be giving the first period of evaluation. And when I say evaluation, the entire system of the quality management, whether it's operating effectively, whether it is meeting, it has all the components, that evaluation has to be done by the firm within a period of 1 year from the effective date. And the annual evaluation has to be signed by the managing partner or the CEO. I'll cover this in the subsequent slides. So it requires an annual evaluation also, which is a very, very big change, which was not done before in the existing SQC-1. Objective of SQM-1. SQM-1 provides the objective of the firm in managing quality, which is to design, implement, and operate the system of quality management. Similar to any system of internal control, the SQM needs to have a purpose. The purpose is important for designing the SQM and determining whether the SQM is effective. So that is the objective. And if I talk about objective of the SQM, the objective is to provide firms. So when you will establish or implement this system of quality management, you will do your annual evaluation after completion of 1 year or doing the ongoing monitoring. It should provide the firm with reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel fulfill their responsibilities in accordance with professional standards. So, for example, the code of ethics or any other independent standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Engagement reports issued by the firm or engagement partner are appropriate in these circumstances. So absolute reasonable assurance is not an absolute assurance, but the standard highlights that by implementing the system of quality management, the firm should be able to conclude with evaluation at the end of the year that there is the system is being implemented, and the reports issued by the firm or engagement partners are appropriate in these circumstances. So this is something which is very, very important and one should note. This slide gives you differences between the SQC-1, if I talk about from a component level. So currently SQC-1, the standard on quality control, I'm sure everyone will be familiar of, because this is very much required whenever there's a base standard which the policies which you will have to set up before undertaking any engagement at the firm level. So these are the 6 components currently which are there in SQC-1: leadership responsibilities, relevant ethical requirement, acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagements, human resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. And if I move to SQM-1, the exposure draft, and which will be issued as a final standard, the additional elements are your firm's risk assessment process. So this is an additional element which has been introduced, the component in the SQM-1, and the information and communication. So existing component have also been significantly expanded, and I will cover briefly in the next 2 slides. However, the new component which have been added in the SQM is the firm's risk assessment process and the information and communication. These 2 slides cover the components of SQM-1 and how they have been expanded, or which are the new components. So the whole SQM-1 revolves around these 8 components, and therefore it is very, very important to understand these 8 components. What is something which is being implemented when I'm talking about the system of quality management. The first component, which is very important, is the governance and leadership. So governance and leadership, there is a very increased focus on the governance and leadership, and Rajiv also mentioned that increased focus on the leadership, on the responsibilities of the engagement in charge or the engagement quality reviewer. They have spoken about the standard covers in detail about the increased focus. So if you look at here, there is a significant expansion, recognizes its paramount importance to engagement quality through robustness of the standard. So identifying individuals with ultimate and operational responsibility and accountability for the SQM. So what the standard requires? The standard requires that the firm should identify a person, an individual who will have the ultimate and operational responsibility and accountability for the implementation and successful implementation of the system of quality management. It could be the firm's chief executive officer or equivalent, or if appropriate, the firm's managing board of partners or equivalent. Having a culture that promotes quality. So the tone at the top is very, very important. What the standard is being focusing and explaining. Has to be a culture that promotes quality, having a strategic decision that demonstrate a commitment to quality, establishing an organizational structure and allocate resources in a manner that supports the effective design, implementation, and operation of the firm's SQM. Establishing policies or procedure for periodic performance evaluation of leadership, which means the persons who are responsible for the implementation of the SQM. There is a requirement for having a performance evaluation on a periodic basis and addressing the outcome of the performance evaluation that links to monitoring and remediation. So there's a focus on governance and leadership responsibility being given to the CEO or equivalent of the firm's managing partner to make sure that there's a right tone at the top. There are policies in place, and there is a commitment to quality through the policies, through continuous messaging, or through taking appropriate action whenever any deficiency is being noted in any of the controls. Risk assessment process, new component that drives top-down risk-based approach. So the firm will have to establish outcome-focused quality objective, identifying and assessing quality risk to achieving the quality objective, and the responses have to be designed and implemented to address the quality risk. Definition of responses is consistent with the control activities in COSO, so it's more like implementing a control framework. Resources, the third component, it is an existing component of SQC-1. However, this is expanded beyond human resources because now there is so much increased use of technology. So it also talks about technological, financial, and intellectual resources. Information and communication, this is a new component, and that requires the firm to establish an information system so that the firm and personnel communicate relevant and reliable information. So for example, if there's a client acceptance, that the personnel should be sharing the information, all the right and the relevant information before the firm is concluding whether to accept a client. The firm's culture promotes exchange of information, which means there is a transparent and a culture, and a culture which promotes the sharing of the information at the right time. The firm communicates information about the SQM externally as relevant. So, for example, if there's a requirement to share the information about the SQM evaluation externally, then that should be, kind of shared. Monitoring and remediation. So, as I mentioned, the approach till now was on monitoring in SQC-1, and it was talking about through inspection or through the firm may take another steps. However, now it is very, very clear, very, very significantly or in very detail, the standard talks about monitoring and remediation. So it has to be on a proactive basis, it has to be ongoing, it has to be continuous. So what the standard says is that the firm leadership is responsible to monitor effectiveness of remedial action. So if there is anything which requires remedial action, that has to be undertaken by the firm, by the leadership in the firm, and monitoring the entire system, and the leadership or the ultimate person identified for the implementation of the ISKM will have the responsibility to monitor the entire system, all component action and responses, and not only engagement inspection. So I'm sure many of you will have this policy or this process of carrying out the inspection of the closed engagement. So what the new exposure draft says that it is not just the inspection, it also talks about testing of the control processes which are there, in the system for other component to make sure that everything is there, is in place, and there are no deficiencies. There is an increased focus on tailoring the scope and frequency of monitoring activities. In terms of the ethical requirements, acceptance and continuous engagement performance, this is substantially the same as the current standard. And if I just cover briefly, ethical requirement deals with fulfilling relevant ethical requirements by the firm as well as its personnel. Also deals with the relevant ethical requirements to the extent they apply to the others external to the firm. So for example, if you are using the services of an service provider, which is external person, or you're using an external third party for any of the engagement or a vendor, there should be policies to make sure, for example, the third party should be competent, the third party should meet the minimum standards. In terms of acceptance and continuance, it deals with the firm's judgment about whether to accept or continue a client relationship or a specific engagement. For the engagement performance, it deals with the firm's action to promote and support the consistent performance of quality engagements, including through direction, supervision and review, consultation, and differences of opinion. So these elements were already there in your existing SQC-1, but these are more expanded and provided detailed requirements in the standard. Moving on to the next slide, after the 8 components, which are very, as I mentioned, those are something which one should understand clearly before, the standard, the monitoring process is understood. This is something which is very important when I talk about the implementation as well as the monitoring. So who has the ultimate responsibility for the SQM? So SQM requires that the firm should design, implement, and operate SQM. As a result, the firm remains ultimately responsible for the SQM. Nevertheless, the firm is not an individual, and therefore the firm needs to assign responsibility. So the firm can assign responsibilities to the individual, and the individuals needs to be identified, which means once the standard is implemented, the firm will be required to identify the individual who will be accountable for their assigned roles. So, for example, the firm will need to identify the person who will have the ultimate responsibility and accountability for the SQM, assigned to either the CEO or managing partner, as I covered in the earlier slide. That person should have expected to have an understanding of SQM-1, should be ultimately responsible and accountable for the firm achieving the objective of SQM-1, and should be responsible for evaluating and concluding. The annual evaluation, which I mentioned, has to be conducted after 1 year. Every year it has to be conducted on whether the SQM is achieving the objective of the SQM, which is important to holding them directly responsible. So if you look at these responsibility and accountability, that lies with the senior most person in the firm. That could be the managing partner or the CEO. And that person should have a fair understanding of the SQM-1, should be responsible for taking the remedial action at the right time. So this is on the ultimate responsibility. And now coming to the operational responsibility, the firm can identify another individual or the committee or the members who have the operational responsibility for the system of quality management. That person or the committee should also have the understanding of SQM-1, and they will be responsible and accountable for the design, implementation, and operation, which means raising the red flags at the right time. If there is any deficiency in any of the controls, for example, if there is any error in the software used by the firm, there should be a process set up that the error is identified at the right time and immediately rectified. For any such deficiency or error, the firm is required to have the documentation to demonstrate that what steps the firm have taken to remediate such deficiency. In terms of operational responsibility, there could be individuals who are responsible for complying with the independence requirement for monitoring and remediation process. Yeah. So after the responsibility, I would now cover a very, very important point on the network requirement. So network, as you know, is defined in the standard itself, and there's a definition in the exposure draft which talks about network firm means a firm or entity that belongs to the firm's network. Networks in the firm within the network can be structured in a variety of ways, and it is very much possible that the network may establish requirement for the firm related to its SQM or provide services that are used by the firm in its system of quality management. So member firm will still be responsible for the engagement it performs, the reports that are issued by the firm, and its system of quality management. So even if any of the firm is using the network or the network controls, or they are following the requirements for monitoring and remediation and inspection established by the network firm, the member firm will continue to be responsible for the engagement it performs. So this exposure draft addresses the firm's responsibility when the firm belongs to a network and the firm complies with network requirement or uses network services in the system of quality management or in the performance of engagement. Network may establish requirement regarding the firm's SOQM, which are described as network requirement. So you will see there is a separate section in the standard which deals with network requirement. And what is expected? It is expected that the firm remains responsible for its own SOQM. As a result, in order to place reliance on network requirement or network services, it is important that the firm understands the network requirement on network services and the impact they may have on their system of quality management. So you can refer to the network requirements if any of the controls are being set up by the network and are being used by the member firm, then that has to be understood and applied in your system of quality management. So that is something on the network requirement or network services. And for the network, after the network, they have also covered the service provider. So SQM-1 recognizes that the firm may not have all the resources. So as I mentioned, that this standard is applicable to all the firms and scalability is covered in the standard. So the SQM-1 recognizes that the firm may not have all the resources they need internally, and therefore they may use service providers. And service providers can be external to the firm's network. Resources from service provider as defined include technological, intellectual, or human resources used by the firm in the SOQM or performance of engagement. And you can use human resources from the other firms. So Rajiv mentioned about that when during the COVID time, we were not able to travel, we're using the firm's network. So it is very much possible that besides network, you might be using the component auditors from the other firm, which are not related to the firm or the firm's network. So that is something which is also covered within the standard. A very important point to note here is that the firm cannot outsource its SOQM or responsibility for the SOQM. So the firm cannot say, okay, the service provider will be dealing with the SOQM responsibilities. The SOQM responsibilities remains with the firm. The resources from the service provider can assist the firm in fulfilling the requirements of SQM-1. As a result, when using resources from service provider, the firm is responsible for ensuring that the resources are appropriate for use in the SOQM. So the responsibility remains with the firm. Some of the examples which you can see on the slide of resources from a service provider, for example, individuals engaged to perform the firm's monitoring activities or engagement quality reviews. So engagement quality reviews will be covered by Amit, but just as an example that it might be possible that the firm may not have sufficient expertise, and depending on a particular engagement, you may want to have the service engagement quality review by a service provider. Commercial IT application, use of the auditor's external expert to assist the engagement team in obtaining audit evidence. So these could be some of the areas where service provider can be used. The key message is one needs to understand that the responsibility remains with the firm and what kind of work is being delegated or used through the service provider. Now, moving on to the other components in detail, slightly in greater detail on governance and leadership. So every firm will have to set up the quality objectives and supporting the SQM. So when the quality objectives for the component is set up, one need to remember what is the expectation or what is the ask or what is the overall objective and the purpose. So for the governance and leadership, there should be commitment to quality, responsible leadership which is accountable for quality, and demonstration of commitment towards quality through excellent behavior. So what the firm needs to do, they need to set up the appropriate structure. There should be a clear definition of roles, responsibility, and authority to enable design, implementation, and operation of the firm's quality management. Resource needs, including financial resources, are planned for, and resources are obtained, allocated, or assigned in a manner that is consistent with the firm's commitment to quality. Information and communication, it is very important that the firm should have a proper communication channel to make sure that the right messages are given internally as well as externally. So, for example, communication of the policies. If there is any regulatory development which might impact the audit engagement or the other engagement, so the firm should have a proper channel of a fair communication, and the communication system should be such that it is accurate, complete, timely, and valid to enable the proper functioning of the firm's system of quality management. The type of information could be manual, or it could be it could have IT element. For example, every use of any software being used by the firm for the communications. Communication, as I mentioned, could be internal, which means within the firm, which could be on your important developments or the policies, or it could be communication even by the engagement team or by the engagement partner or the engagement quality control reviewer, if the information is relevant for any of the engagement. So the firm should have the policies in place to ensure the two-way communication. And if there is a need for the communication with the external party, so if there is a communicate requirement for communicating with the external service provider, or if the information is communicated externally when required by law, regulation, or professional standard. So, for example, if there's a requirement by the or inquiry by any regulator to submit information, there should be a proper channel for sharing the information. The other component, risk assessment process, which I covered briefly in my previous slide. So the firm's risk assessment process is a process that is used to establish quality objectives to identify and assess quality risk. So what are the quality risks for the firm and how to design and implement the responses? So it involves establishing the quality objectives. So one has to identify what are the quality objective that has to be established, identifying and assessing the quality risk. What could be the risk at the that may adversely affect achievement of quality objective? For example, any strategic and operational decision action, or action by any regulator, or by which may impact the model of the firm, and then designing and implementing responses to address these quality risk. The nature, timing, and extent of responses based on the reasons for the assessment given to the quality risk has to be determined. Changes in the nature and circumstances of the firm or its engagement. So this is what the firm needs to do. This is risk assessment process. This is something very, very important, that the quality objective should be established clearly to assess the quality risk. On the resources, as I mentioned, there's a significant expansion in the existing component of SQC-1. Now the technological and intellectual resources are also covered. So the firm may use resources like the IT application, the technological resources relevant to the standard. For example, resources that are directly used in designing, implementing, or operating the firm system of quality management. So resources may be external or internal. Ethical requirements, so there has to be proper policies to make sure that the firm is following the code of ethics. The independence declarations obtained before any engagement is accepted, or the annual declaration. So this is what you are doing currently also in SQC-1. So what the standard requires, the standard of quality management, is that the firm needs to establish the quality objective that address the fulfillment of responsibility in accordance with the relevant ethical requirement, including those related to the independence. Engagement performance. So the ultimate objective, the overall objective, is to make sure that the engagement are delivered with the highest set of quality. The reports are appropriate in these circumstances. So it talks about using of the professional judgment, complying with these standards, consultation on difficult or contentious matters. So there should be people identified, there should be policies on consultation. And if there are any differences between the engagement team or the engagement quality reviewer, then what are the steps to be taken in such situation, and whether those policies are documented, and whether those have been appropriately resolved by the firm. And engagement documentation are being maintained on a timely basis after the date of the engagement report. The other component on the acceptance and continuance of client relationships. So this is an existing component. What is required is that there should be a proper policy and as well as a process and system in place to make sure that all the information about the nature and circumstances of engagement can be obtained before any engagement is accepted. And the firm should have the necessary ability and expertise to provide that or to perform that engagement. So, for example, if a particular sector requires a skill set, so whether the firm has the ability, or whether there are systems in place to check whether the firm has the ability to provide such engagement. Moving on to the last and something very important, section of my presentation today on the monitoring and remediation. The firm monitors the system as a whole. So unlike the earlier or the existing SQC-1, the new standard once issued, it talks about monitoring the entire system of quality management as a whole. And when I talk about the entire quality management system, it talks about that it has to be on an ongoing basis, on a continuing basis. So it comprises of the ongoing monitoring activities, which means the firm will have to even identify an individual or team of individual who will perform these ongoing monitoring activities. So for example, inspection of in-process engagement or the completed engagement. So in-process engagement means when you're talking about the ongoing engagements and whether the all the policies and the processes are being followed. The nature, timing, and extent may be affected by the size, structure, and organization of the firm. Scalability, which has been inbuilt in the standard. There are paragraphs and there are which can be referred for scalability. Need for extensive monitoring activities may require changes to the nature, timing, and extent of the monitoring activities. Evaluating findings. So once the monitoring activities ongoing are being taking place, there is a very much a possibility that there are findings are identified or there is a deficiency. Every finding may not be a deficiency. So when I say finding, yes, there could be observation that there is a policy lapse or the teams are not following a particular policy, or probably, let's say, for example, the independence declaration is not obtained on time, or let's say the documentation is not on time. There could be any deficiency or any finding, any observation coming from the inspection, the checklist are not filled. There could be any such observation. So depending on what is the finding, one has to identify the deficiency and then determine whether that is severe or pervasive. So it means the evaluation process is a fairly bit long here, and the expectation is that all the findings will have to be looked into by the individuals responsible in the firm and then determine the root cause of the identified deficiency. So one has to determine the nature and the root cause and frequency with which the matter give rise to deficiency has occurred. So, some of the questions that may be asked in evaluating the severity and pervasiveness of an identified deficiency could be, for example, what is the nature of the identified deficiency, and if it relates to engagement, what type of engagement it relates to, what is the root cause, and what aspect of the SQM does it relate to? Does it relate to, for example, the client acceptance and engagement component? Does it relate to the ethical requirements? So one has to identify to which component it relates. How significant is that aspect to the SQM overall? So what is the significance? And before you determine whether it is severe and pervasive, is the deficiency a design deficiency, or was a deficiency in the implementation or operation of the SQM? So these are some of the questions that one has to ask before concluding. And if I give you an example of a deficiency, for example, a deficiency is identified whereby engagement documentation in a digital format was not properly uploaded to an application on the firm server due to power outages or due to probably a technical glitch. This resulted in a loss of engagement documentation. So as a remedial measure, the firm amends its responses by installing backup generators to support the continual functioning of the firm server during power outages. So this is an example where there was a deficiency. The firm identified the deficiency, the firm took the remedial action and then implemented. So all these things have to be documented and, kind of part of your overall system of quality management. Responding to identified deficiency, I think I've given you an example that the remedial action has to be taken. Findings about a particular engagement, any finding which is there, one has to there should be a system that there has to be a consultation with appropriate individuals, discussing the matter with the management if the matter relates to the engagement, and performing the omitted procedure. And if certain procedure are missed by the engagement team, that has to be taken care of. Actions taken by the firm do not relieve the firm of the responsibility to take further actions relating to the finding in the context of the SQM. So even if the firm takes a remedial action, it does not mean that there is no responsibility to take any further action relating to any finding in the context of the system of quality management. Ongoing communication, the standard also has a requirement that whenever any deficiency, any finding is there, then the firm has to communicate about the deficiencies. So one, the firm has to communicate what monitoring activities are being performed, and if there is any deficiency, what kind of deficiencies are there? Are they severe and pervasive? And what the actions, the remedial actions taken by the firm to address the identified deficiencies. So there is a requirement to have the ongoing or periodic communication to individuals with ultimate responsibility and accountability of the SQM. Process owner, now the firm may set up various processes. For example, the process for there could be a process for your learning policies, there's a process for talent, there's a process for your resources. So depending on independence, they will have to be updated about all these deficiencies, and they should use this information as a basis for further communication to personnel about the importance of quality, to hold individuals accountable for the roles assigned to them. So when the firm will carry out the root cause analysis for the deficiency, they will have to hold individuals accountable and to identify key concern about the SQM in a timely manner. Evaluating the system of quality management. So the evaluation has to be done on an annual basis, which it is not that it has to be done only once. So it has to be done every year once the standard is implemented. The timing of the SQM evaluation depends on the firm. It may coincide with the fiscal year end of the firm or the completion of the engagement. Or the completion of an annual monitoring cycle. Concluding on SQM, this also require a conclusion, which means the firm will have to do the testing of the control and then conclude. So the firm will have to conclude whether the system is being operated and as a whole provides firm with reasonable assurance that the objectives of the SQM are met. So the firm will have to sign, the managing partner or the CEO or the person who has the ultimate responsibility will have to sign this annual evaluation. And if there's a deficiency or unable to provide reasonable assurance, then the firm will have to take prompt and appropriate action and communication. So which means the firm will have to identify, will have to determine the measures and determine that how this will be remediated. And if the belief that system is not there is severe deficiency, in some cases, they may also be required to take a legal advice to understand the repercussions on the engagement on the overall quality system of the firm. The firm also requires, that's very interesting, on the performance evaluation. So it talks about the persons who are responsible for the implementation of the SQM will have there's a requirement to carry out the performance evaluation. So the monitoring activities, it may very much possible that there could be a repercussion. The standard requires that the periodic evaluation should be carried out, and positive performance evaluation may be rewarded. And if there is any negative, then that could be may have a negative consequence. Firm may take corrective action to address a negative performance evaluation affecting the firm's achievement of its quality objectives. The last slide on the documentation. I think documentation is in each of these standards we talk about documentation, and there's a standard for the firm. So there needs to be sufficient documentation. The requirements are very, very comprehensive and extensive if I compare to SQC-1. And why documentation is important? Because it helps personnel understand the SQM and what is expected of them. So the standard is a bit lengthy, and as I mentioned, that it's not possible to cover in detail in 45 minutes. So when you are going to talk about the implementation of the standard in the firm, then obviously it requires a fair bit of discussion and the documentation. So it will help the people or the employees to understand the SQM and what is expected of them, so that they're able to perform engagement and fulfill their roles and responsibility with respect to the firm system of quality management. It will help the responses to be implemented and operated in the manner that the firm intended. It helps the firm retain organizational knowledge and the basis for why decisions related to the SQM were made. It will help the firm to monitor the system of quality management and provide information so that leadership is able to evaluate and conclude on the SQM. It establishes accountability for the firm by evidencing that the firm has designed, implemented, and operated SQM in accordance with SQM-1. The period of time for retention of documentation to be established should be sufficient to permit those performing monitoring procedure to evaluate the SQM, or for a longer period of time if required by law or regulation. So the exposure draft does not mention any period. However, we have a period in SA 220. So that is something one needs to remember. And just one last message before I hand it over back to the chairman, sir, is that there are no significant differences if we compare it to the SQM-1. The only changes that have been made in this standard is about using the Indian references, talking about the references of the preface, references of the Indian standard, SA600, and there is a deletion of the reference to the public sector entities, because it is possible that even in the case of non-public sector entity, the requirement may exist. So the changes have been made to align it with the local with the other Indian standards. So I think that's all from my side, and thanks for listening. And if you have any question, we can take it up at the end.
Hello, Anilji. So thank you, Deepa ma'am,
Vasu sir.
for the wonderful session. So I'm just moving on to the next speaker now. Hello, Anilji. So I think Anilji का नेट का थोड़ा issue आ रहा है. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you,
Yes,
Deepa
sir.
ma'am,
Yes,
for
sir.
the wonderful session on
We
SQM1.
can move for third session, sir.
Yeah. So now introducing to the last speaker of the day, C. Amit Mitra ji. He is a senior partner of MKSC and Associates. He has over 24 years of rich experience in audit and accounting services to domestic and international clients. He is an ardent speaker in various forums for ICA and for other forums. He possesses rich exposure of IFRS and has been a lead engagement partner in various listed and large multinational engagements, and has exposure on implementation of IFCR. He is a joint leader for of professional practice group of the firm and is head of audit and accounting quality management for the India firm, that is MKSA and Associates. He is a special invited to the Audit Assurance Standard Board since 2019 and has been part of the subcommittee working on SQM-1 and SQM-2. He is also a peer review and technical reviewer contributing to the FRRB of ICI. So he will be taking up the topic for SQM2. So over to you, Amit.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so good evening, Chairman, sir. Good evening, all my friends. And thank you, AASB, for this opportunity. Really privileged to hear Rajiv and Deepa on this all important standards, which are likely to be game changers. Hello, am I audible? Okay, okay, okay. So I'll just share my slides.
Yes, sir.
So kindly make it full screen, sir.
Yeah, it's full screen now. Visible?
Hanji. Fine, sir. Fine, sir.
Okay, okay. So I was saying that really privileged to hear Deepa and Rajiv on these two important standards, and all three of us have worked together a long time ago. In fact, I think about 8 months ago, and really good to see that these standards will finally see the light of the day very, very soon. And looking forward for your valuable comments and feedback on these exposure draft, because this is going to be, these standards are going to be game changers. They are going to change the way we measure the quality of the firm, and this will also tell us this will also give us a measure as to how the audit firms will be looked at by not only the regulators but by prospective customers. Okay, now SQM2, this is a standard. You already have a lot of background on SQM2, SQM1, and the third standard, SA220. SQM2, this is a standard which provides guidance on the engagement quality reviews. And this is one of the three of the new quality standards, which is due to be released. And objective is simple. Objective is to help understand what issues we have identified, what issues the regulators have identified, and whether those have been fixed in these proposed standards. So the standard setters recognize the importance of the engagement quality review and the public interest importance ascribed by certain stakeholders. It was felt that engagement quality reviews were not sufficiently robust, and similar concerns were also raised by audit oversight bodies. And I have a couple of slides wherein they have specifically pointed out on the issues noted in the quality reviews. Therefore, the need was to revise the current standards, and objective was one, which is to strengthen and improve the firm's management of quality for all engagement performed under the standards of auditing, and more explicitly incorporating the quality management approach, which is primarily fostering the ability of these standards to be applied to a wide range of circumstances and enhancing the requirements and application material. So for us, as we move ahead, the topics are simple and straightforward. The agenda is very straightforward. We will look into the current status of the standard, which all of us are aware that is in the exposure draft stage. So there is, as of now, there is no effective date. And then we'll move to see what is new in these in SQM2. And then we have a couple of slides on the regulator's observation on the flaws noted in the existing SQC1, not in the existing SQC1, but primarily where the audit firms have faltered in non-complying in non-compliance with the SQC1, and then which basically gives you a flavor that these standards will carry significant importance once they are uh, once they are complied with. And then next we will dwell upon the the revised standards as to how that is expected to be a game changer, and finally some differentiators between SQC1 and SQM2. Obviously, one question that comes in mind is that if these standards were already there, then why do we need the revised standard? Why do we need the SQM2? So I have a couple of slides primarily differentiating as to what exactly is new, so that all of you can appreciate the need for this. But before that, before I turn the slide, what is the objective of this change? And if we see the purpose of engagement quality review is now to evaluate the significant judgments made by the engagement team. Now, to further enhance and clarify the various requirements that ASB sought to improve the robustness of the requirement of SQM-1. Since the engagement quality review is a firm level approach, this is a firm level response to address quality risk that is implemented by the engagement quality reviewers on behalf of the firm. So this is one is the engagement, the individual engagement that is performed by the engagement partners, the teams, and then this is the firm level initiative wherein the engagement quality reviewer performs the work on behalf of the firm. So the exposure draft addresses the engagements for which the engagement quality review is to be performed. Obviously, it is not that EQ's engagement quality reviewer is required on all the engagements. The exposure draft defines as to where mandatorily it needs to be there, and obviously you could you may want to add certain other criterias of companies to be covered under this. Then next is the specific criteria for the individual to be eligible to perform the engagement quality review. This is significant. This is very important. So that needs to be defined. There has to be defined policies and procedures of the firm, define the criterias where how an individual can be appointed as the EQCM. And third, the requirement for the performance and the documentation of the review have been included. So documentation, I think both the learned speakers covered about documentation. There is significant documentation requirement even in SQM2 as to how what kind of documentation is expected from the EQR and what kind of how it needs to be demonstrated and what all needs to be done and documented by the review. Okay, so current status, I think there's nothing much to add. It is in the exposure stage. We have almost a month for us to share our value adds. Now, just briefly moving from SQM-1 to this, SQM-1 primarily deals with firms' responsibility to design, implement, and operate a system of quality management for audits or reviews or financial statement or other assurance or other related engagements. So primarily there are those 8 components which Deepa touched upon in her deliberation: firm's risk assessment process, governance and leadership, relevant ethical requirement, acceptance and continuance, engagement performance, resources, information communication, and monitoring and remediation. Now, moving after those 8 components, I think SQM2 is pretty straightforward. It primarily talks about the appointment and eligibility of the engagement quality reviewer, how an appointment has to happen, what would be the eligibility I touched upon briefly. Then the engagement quality review responsibilities in relation to the performance and documentation of the engagement quality review, and then the nature, timing, and extent of engagement quality review performance. And of course, from an effective date perspective, I mean, it is open. Okay, the regulators. Now, for all of us as audit firms, the observations of the regulators, which for us is QRB, the NFRA, and the FRRB. I mean, I could have easily filled up slides and pages for that. But the idea here is not to scare anyone. The idea here is to dwell upon the fact that it is not only standards on auditing pertaining to how you do the audit. These standards also carry significant importance even in your quality reviews done by the regulators. So I've just briefly picked up 5-6 pointers for you to appreciate. Now, the QRB observations said that, no, in this case, they picked up an observation where they said that the policies and procedures requiring an engagement quality review, that policies and procedure itself was not established by the CFR. And then how do you then judge and evaluate the significant judgments made by the engagement team and the conclusions reached thereon in formulating the report? How do you evaluate that the desired work was performed by the EQR on this? This was not demonstrable on the archive files or on the hard file. Moving on, no criteria are set out against the audits and reviews to be evaluated by the body. So criteria ही नहीं है. I mean, how do you have to define as to what all audits and reviews would be covered under the EQR? Those policies and procedures by the firm were not made available. Moving on, not ensuring that appropriate procedures regarding the acceptance and continuance of client relationship and audit engagements have been followed, and determining that conclusions reached in this regard are appropriate. So there has to be a policy of how do you accept the client, what would you verify at the time of acceptance or at the time of continuance, how would you evaluate an audit relationship, how would you evaluate the independence threats, the ethics threat, the intimidation threat, the self-review threat, or it could be any. I mean, the firm may want to establish 10 more standards. Now we have PMLA also coming in, which also is required and expected by the chartered accountant firms to evaluate at the time of acceptance. So it just continues to increase. Now we can't have a scenario where even the basic policies are not made available for the regulator. Quickly moving on, no documentation to demonstrate the review by the engagement quality reviewer. Bhai, kya review kara hai? And has he put in certain comments? Has he put in certain ticks? Has he put in some certain demonstrable remarks? Has there been exchange of emails? Everything can't be verbal. That this was verbally discussed and agreed. That won't suffice. I mean, that it needs to be documented and sitting in our files. So, and the firm did not had any policies and procedures in regard to the measurement of the engagement performance, documentation, and the archival process. Now, the standards on auditing are extremely clear on all. For example, what is the archival process? A maximum of 60 days is what we can look at. There are firms who are now considering 15 days archival. There are firms who are considering 30 days. But there has to be a policy. There is flexibility up to a maximum of 60 days, but there has to be a policy and it needs to be documented. It needs to be shown. It needs to be implemented. So, and then another thing which was picked up by the regulators was they just could not find the root cause analysis of whatever work was performed by, let's say, the EQR, or whatever corrective actions were required to be taken and deficiencies noted during the inspection process. How was it communicated back to the partner? So all these things were picked up in the review by the QRB. Moving on, NFRA. Again, we've just picked up very few. We could have really filled up. I could have really filled up slides, but that's not the objective here. Okay. So I think the most favorite observations of NFRA is the compliance with the code of ethics, compliance with the independence, compliance with Section 144 of the Companies Act. So audit firms' compliance with the fundamental principles of code of ethics was threatened by familiarity and self-interest threat since they picked up work outside the requirements of Section 144. These were the observations of NFRA in one of the reviews that they conducted. And moving on, SQC policy of the firm did not provide any detail as required by SQC-1 relating to the policies and procedures. Let's say, for example, a human resource policy addressing the personal issues such as the recruitment, the competence, the promotions. So all those things need to be documented, and the regulators are wanting to see that because everything is sitting under the SQC. Moving on, even on the declarations also, another observation was noted that there has to be written declaration. The audit firm is required to obtain written declarations of compliance with its policies and procedures from all the personnel standard, all the personnel across. And now in this case, the same was not available in the audit file, and hence it was presumed. I mean, obviously the company, the audit firm in this case defended by saying that it was obtained, however, it was not recorded in the file and all. But the regulator presumed that since it was not available in the file, it can be safely presumed that the confirmation were not obtained at the time when it was required to be obtained. So this is how the strictness or let's say the tag, the price tag on the SQC-1 or now SQM-2, going forward SQM-2 and SQM-3, the price tag is there. Okay, now on the appointment and eligibility. Again, as I said that this is a firm-wide, it has to be for the firm as a whole. It can't be for one individual engagement. So the firm has to set forth the criteria for eligibility to be appointed as the engagement quality reviewer. Now, obviously, the EQR cannot be a member of the engagement team because then there is obviously an independent. It has to be an independent review of the work done by the engagement team and the engagement partner on certain aspects, which I will cover in my subsequent slide. Now, in this case, EQR cannot be a member of the engagement team. He should not have he should have competence and capabilities to understand the industry, understand the business. He should have experience. More importantly, he should have time. He should have bandwidth to undertake the EQR, to be able to demonstrate that he has put in his heart, soul, and mind on the review of the engagement, and he has shared his views, his thought process, and he has ensured that the appropriate quality is maintained. And of course, he should have the appropriate authority to perform the engagement quality review. I mean, look at a scenario where, let's say, a senior manager is made a EQCR and he's due, and as per this, he is required to do a quality review check of a partner. It will not work. I mean, clearly, I mean, there is this. He will be intimidated, and so one needs to ensure that the EQR has the appropriate authority, and besides the responsibility, he should have the authority to perform the engagement quality review, to be able to push it down the throat, the quality aspects. Now, obviously, he needs to be in compliance with the provisions of laws and regulations. And another important aspect, which was not so clearly defined or mentioned in SQC-1, is the cooling off period. Now, cooling off period is very, very specifically pointed out and defined in SQM-2. Obviously, there has been linkages between SQM-2 and the Code of Ethics, and then I have a slide which primarily gives a table. It's a small snapshot which gives how the cooling off period needs to be applied. The EQR has to comply with the ethical requirements. I think I've covered. So he needs to be independent. It cannot be a self-review threat, which primarily comes from the fact that he can't be a team member. He has to be independent, and familiarity threat, intimidation threat. I'd give an example where, let's say, senior manager is doing a EQR review of his partner. That will not work. He needs to be independent. Okay. So what exactly is engagement quality review? I mean, people will say that, I mean, this is an additional cost, and in any case, the engagement partner is reviewing everything. There is an engagement team who's doing all the work. There is a review process. Why do we really need this? Well, this is the law. This is the mandate, and there is enough flexibility. Besides the PIE, which is the public interest entities, there is flexibility as to what additional companies or what additional industries you may want to cover as part of the EQR. Now, from let's say from the objective perspective, so it's an objective evaluation of the significant judgments made by the engagement team and the conclusion reached thereon. This is what is the role of the engagement quality reviewer. The engagement quality reviewer's evaluation of significant judgment is performed in the context of professional standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. It is important to understand here that an engagement quality review is not intended to be an evaluation of whether the entire engagement complies with the professional standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirement, or with the firm's policies and procedures. It is an oversight. It is a review. The responsibilities. It is not a replacement for the responsibilities of engagement partner. Engagement quality reviewer is also not a member of the engagement team. The performance of the engagement quality review does not change the responsibilities of the engagement partner for managing and achieving quality on the engagement, or for the direction supervision of the members of the engagement team and review of their work. The engagement quality reviewer is not required to obtain evidence to support the opinion or conclusions on the engagement, but the engagement team may obtain further evidence in responding to the matters raised by the engagement quality reviewer. So it is the other way around. I mean, let's say if something is being reviewed by the engagement quality reviewer, and if we suggest or identifies that this area would need some specific attention or special attention and some additional procedures are required to be performed, then the engagement team should be able to perform those procedures. Okay, so the proposed SQM-1 establishes the firm's responsibilities for its system of quality management and requires the firm to design and implement responses to address the quality risk in a manner that is based on the assessment given by the quality risk. So everything is quality, everything is risk based on. The objective is to design, implement, operate a system of quality management for audits or reviews of financial statements or other assurance or related services engagement performed by the firm that provides the firm with reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel fulfill the responsibilities in accordance with the professional standards or other legal requirements, conducts engagement in accordance with such standards, and engagement reports issued by the firm are of appropriate and are relevant to that particular circumstance. So the objectives are very clear. At the end of the day, one word: quality of our audit report, quality of our documentation, due process followed to arrive at the conclusions for us to issue the auditor's report. Cooling off period, I touched upon. This is something new. So, I mean, the initial, the SQC-1 primarily talked about the 7-year period, but now they have defined. It says that if someone has acted as a EQR for 7 consecutive years, then EQR, not the EP, right? So if someone has acted for 7 years at EQR, then the cooling off period is 3 years. And if there is a combination, let's say if the person is engagement partner for up to 3 years and EQR for 4 years or more years, in all total of 7 years, then that is again 3 consecutive years is the cooling off period. So it depends on how many years have you been EP. So in the third scenario, or let's say in the fourth scenario here, there is in a combination role, if you've been EP for 3 or more years and EQR for 4 or less years, then 5 consecutive years. So that means if you are EP for 3 or more, then 5 consecutive years. And if you're EP for up to 3, then 3 consecutive years. And in any other case, which is not covered in 2, 3, and 4, you have a cooling off of 2 years. And obviously, reference has been drawn to the Code of Ethics, Volume 1, along with the SQM-2. Okay, now we understood the objectives of the EQR. Now, what are the responsibilities of EQR? So again, obtain an understanding of the client gather information communicated by the engagement team regarding the nature and circumstances of the engagement and the entity, identify deficiencies that may relate to or affect the areas involving significant judgments made by the engagement team, discuss with the engagement team, engagement partner, significant matters and significant judgments made at the time of planning, performing, or reporting the engagement. So that means the involvement is in all the three stages: planning, performing, and reporting. Then review selected engagement documents, including engagement areas related to significant judgments made by the engagement team, and evaluate the basis of making those significant judgments. And then exercise professional and ensure that the engagement team has performed professional skepticism. So you may so let's say professional skepticism is generally needed at the time of performing the engagement. So, but as a EQR, it is relevant for the EQR to understand and see whether professional skepticism was exercised by the engagement team. Moving on, whether the engagement documentation supports the conclusion read. So that means the quality of the documentation is part of the responsibilities of the EQR, and whether the conclusion reads are appropriate. And then evaluate whether appropriate conclusions have taken place on difficult or contentious matters or matters involving difference of opinion. Of course, there could be difference of opinion, and then SQM also talks about what is expected if there is a difference of opinion. I have a slide on that. We'll move on. Evaluate the basis of engagement partner's determination of his involvement, how engagement partner himself has determined that his involvement has been sufficient and appropriate throughout the audit engagement, such that the engagement partner has the relevant basis for determining that significant judgment made and the conclusion reads are appropriate given the nature of the engagement. So these are quite detailed, quite different from let's say a current SQC1, but everything boils down to the proof, which is the documentation. Everything needs to be documented in the audit file. Okay, moving on. Obviously, one thing we can't skip is the review of the financial statements and the auditor's report. Now, again, the engagement quality reviewer shall notify to the engagement partner if he is not comfortable or if he has concerns regarding the judgments made by the engagement teams or conclusion reads, and where he believes that they are not appropriate and some additional procedures are required to be done, or the audit report needs to be modified or amended. So all those are the responsibilities of the engagement quality reviewer. He has to raise a concern directly with the engagement partner. Now, if such concerns are not resolved, then what? If such concerns are not resolved to the engagement quality reviewer satisfaction, the engagement quality reviewer shall notify to the appropriate individuals in the firm, and which again has to flow out of the policies and procedures defined by the firm for effective functioning of the engagement quality review. And then he can say that I can't complete it. The review can't be completed without this, and then the remedial actions would need to be taken. Okay, use of assistance. Now, this has been allowed in SQM-2, which primarily is needed in situations where, let's say, it's a very, very large engagement. It's a group audit, and the group auditors, which let's call them the principal auditors, they have to do an oversight on one of the component audit. And because of the bandwidth issues, the group auditor, the EQR of the parent company may appoint an assistant for the component audit for a direct reporting to him. Because at the end of the day, even as per SA 600, it is the responsibility of the parent auditor to ensure to get comfort. Okay, so we talked about engagement quality reviewer. Now, what about the engagement partner? What are his responsibilities? Again, ensuring that engagement quality reviewer has been appointed. It is the engagement partner's responsibility. He can't tomorrow turn up and say that I ignorance is no bliss. I was not aware that there was a policy in the firm where I was required to appoint an EQR. This will not be accepted. It is his responsibility. It is clear dictate in the standard that it is the responsibility of the EP to ensure that his engagement has a engagement quality reviewer. And then he needs to cooperate with the engagement quality reviewer and inform other team members that there is this person who will do an oversight, and these are the set of responsibilities. Then discussing the significant matters, including significant judgment arising during the audit engagements. And as it said, the EQR needs to be involvement in all the three stages: planning, execution, completion. And then it is also the defined responsibility of the engagement partner to preclude from dating the auditor's report until notification has been received about the completion of completion of work by the engagement quality reviewer. The engagement quality reviewer have to notify to the engagement partner or the engagement team that he is satisfied and he has performed all his work, and the dating of the audit report can happen. Proof of review documentation. I think all the three presenters today talked about the documentation. You are now understand. I had a couple of slides on where we as firms were not able to demonstrate our documentation. Though we may have done the work, we were not able to demonstrate to the regulators, be it QRB, be it NFRA, be it FRRB. Everything needs to be documented. The firm shall establish policies and procedures that require the engagement quality reviewer to take responsibility for documentation of the engagement quality review, which is he has to name the engagement quality reviewer and the individual who assisted the engagement quality review. That note has to be there in the file. And the note will also say that an identification of the engagement documents reviewed by the EQR team. The document needs to be identified that this is what was verified by the EQR. The basis of engagement quality reviewers, determination of completion of the review, what was the basis on which the review was completed, and then the notification to the engagement partner for concerns that the significant judgments made by the engagement team or the conclusions reached thereon are not appropriate. I think I touched upon that. Confirmation of completion of review through a notification. This is also there. And then the date of completion of the engagement quality review. The documentation should be sufficient to enable an experienced practitioner having no previous connection with the engagement to understand the procedures performed by the engagement quality review. So the re-performance standard, as we call it in our audit parlance, it needs to, the documentation needs to demonstrate that. Okay, group audit considerations, I touched upon that. So primarily in the large and complex group audits, EQR may need help of an assistant, which he can take, which is allowed as per the standard. And let's say in another case, the engagement quality reviewer may be appointed for an audit of an entity that is part of a group. For example, when such an audit is required by any law or regulation, even if you have, so let's say the parent auditor is a different audit firm, and then there is a EQR appointed by the parent auditor, and then there is a component company auditor, which is, let's say, mandated by law, and company auditor, as per the law, also has appointed an EQR. The standard says that in this situation, both the EQRs can talk and gain comfort in terms of what kind of review was done and what kind of responsibilities were shared, and basically just sharing of information is between the two EQR is something which can be considered. Impairment of EQR eligibility. There could be situations. I mean, there is obviously someone may have already started the work and then realize that he is not independent, he or she is not independent. He may have purchased some shares or something like that, or he may have some other financial interest or something, or due to any reason, if the EQR believes that they are now impaired, what they need to do, they need to notify the firm, the person nominated as per the policies and procedures, that his or her role is impaired. They will not be able to continue. And obviously, the firm will take necessary action, which is to appoint a new EQR. and if required, rework the work performed by the outgoing EQR. And in case the engagement has not yet commenced, then obviously it is no brainer. The EQR, the conflicted EQR or the impaired EQR will have to decline the appointment. This is the self-declaration. Something basic, but I think now there are rules which govern so that there is no scope of ambiguity. Unresolved concerns we talked about in one of our previous slides. Now, there should be a clear policy in the firm to address such expectations like unresolved concerns. The firm policy may nominate an individual in the firm who would be notified in case there are unresolved concerns between the engagement partner or the EQR or engagement team and EQR or any such concern. And the matter could relate to significant judgments made by the engagement team and or conclusions reached thereon, which in the eyes of the EQR are not appropriate and hence the escalation. And the policy may also require a consultation within or outside the firm. So, let's say any professional or a regulatory body or a council or anyone, but it needs to be framed. There has to be clear-cut policy defined by the firm as to how these matters are to be resolved. Okay, moving on, the differentiators. Of course, cooling off period is one I touched upon. SQC-1 does not speak very clearly about the cooling off period for an individual after previously serving as the engagement partner, which is described in detail in SQM-2, and SQC-1 just states the rotation is required for 7 years. SQM-2 also adds that EQR should comply with the relevant ethical requirements, including relation to threats to objectivity and independence of the engagement quality reviewer, and comply with the provisions of laws and regulations that are relevant in the eligibility of the engagement quality reviewer. Now, on the timing, the new standards require that the criteria for eligibility to be appointed as engagement quality reviewer include having the competence, capability, sufficient time, and appropriate authority to perform the engagement quality review. Now, all these are now very crystallized in detail in the standards for us to not to leave any ambiguity, and also clarifying that the engagement quality reviewer responsibility to perform the engagement quality review at appropriate point in time, as I said, that it needs to be involved at the time of planning, execution, completion, and at the time of drafting of reports, at the time of ensuring that the documentation meets the desired standard, and there is an escalation matrix also. Now, on the documentation by the EQR, EQR have to take the responsibility for documentation of engagement quality review. I think I touched upon that. Now, I think it is important to see the evaluation of professional skepticism. It is important to understand whether EQR is also expected to demonstrate professional skepticism in the file, or he just needs to see that enough professional skepticism was exercised by the team. The engagement quality reviewer does review select engagement documents in support to engagement teams' significant judgments, including where applicable to the type of engagements unit, the exercise of professional skepticism and conclusions each there. So the standard setter acknowledged the view that engagement quality reviewer does not exercise professional skepticism because the term is generally exercised in the context of obtaining and evaluating the audit evidence. The EQR may ask the engagement team to obtain further evidence in responding to the matters raised during the engagement quality review. And at the same time, the standard setters noted that requirement for the engagement quality review to evaluate based on the review of selected engagement documentation, the basis for engagement team's significant judgment, including professional skepticism by the engagement team. So I think it is amply clear. There is no doubt, there is no ambiguity as to who's to be more professionally skeptical, who needs to exercise that, who needs to review that, who needs to ensure that the documentation is enough. So, and given the importance of the engagement quality reviews, evaluation of the engagement team's exercise of professional skepticism, the new application material was also added in SQM-2 to provide guidance in this regard. Coming on to the last slides, I think we've covered this. So identification of on the documentation side, identification of engagement documentation reviewed by the EQR and basis of engagement team's quality reviewer determination of completion of review, and further SQM2 requires documentation on the notification sent by the engagement partner. That's all what I have. Happy to answer questions.
Chairman sir, please.
Yes, so those are first question which we again, how to take up risk for firm risk assessment procedures. That's the first question of the day. And please list some quality risks to be identified while doing the same.
Yeah, so this would be, I think, for Deepa. Deepa.
Yeah, I'm there. I think, Rajiv was also trying to address that. I think that has to be done for all the components. So risk assessment, you will have to decide depending on the, the policies. And to give you an example, for example, I covered a example that if there is a software which has the feature which is not functioning appropriately, does not capture the right information, that could be one particular risk, and therefore how to mitigate that risk, what alternate system could firm establish. So I would suggest that if you really want to understand the various quality risk and the what kind of responses the firm could develop, IAASB has issued a very detailed implementation guide, and why I'm suggesting, because of the interest of time, they have given you a specific example on the component. For example, if there is a commitment by the leadership to set the culture and the tone at the top, so the firm will set up the policy and the objective. But what if it is not being followed in the firm? So what monitoring activities have to be implemented or to carried out by the firm? So I think that implementation guide on SQM-1 can be referred if one really want to look at the quality objective and the risk assessment process. Yeah.
So thank you, ma'am. So the next question is, one question is that how in easy words can we understand firm system of quality management? Is it like a hierarchy structure to be built under each service line or something else?
So in easy word, I would say it's like implementation of the control. It's like a SOX reporting or the control testing. What you do for your clients, probably I will say you do the walkthroughs and the control testing. The same requirement you have when you are talking about the establishing the quality management for the firm. Now, for every component of the SQM-1, what I've covered in my slide, there has to be a quality objective, there has to be a policy, process, and controls in place to ensure that this is achieving the objective, or what is expected. So whenever you set up a policy, to give you an example, that to make sure that the teams are consulting on the right matters, or the EQR, what Amit explained, is being appointed for all the listed engagement or the clients. So does it's working efficiently or effectively? So to capture the essence, that is something what the firms will need to establish. And I think, that is going to be the future standard on quality management, which will be even looked at by the regulators. I noted Amit covered in his presentation, which is really nice, that because going forward, the peer review, the QRB or the NAFRA, everyone will look at this standard and not the SQC-1.
The next question is, in SQC-1, there is one paragraph on familiarity threat. It also says that it is preferable to change engagement partner after 7 years. Is any kind of same condition given in SQM-1 too?
So SQM-1, I mentioned that it has been aligned with the ICA Code of Ethics. So if you refer to the Code of Ethics, there is a rotation, period defined therein, the long-term rotation principle and the familiarity threat. So that is aligned. So that is, you can read it along with the Code of Ethics. So the Code of Ethics will be there for that.
Okay. So, and one user is asking, what are the major differences between SQM-1 and SQM-2?
Okay, both are different standards. So I think,
I
Amit, you want to
think
take
they'll
it
have
up?
to attend the session again.
So I think the biggest difference on a lighter note is SQM-1 is 110 pages, SQM-2 is 21 pages. So, but having said that, I think SQM-2 primarily talks about the engagement quality reviewer, which is independent of the team, and but part of the firm, and it describes as to how the firm has to come up with policies and procedures to ensure that the objectives of the firm are met, which is to deliver high quality audit. And SQM-1 primarily has those 8 components as to how do you achieve that.
Yeah.
Okay. So although this portion is already covered in the presentation, so I'll just be the devil's advocate and ask it again. One user has asked, how is SQC1 is different from SQM1 and SQM2? Although we did cover it, I think just a small
it
recap.
was part of the slide. Yeah. Yeah. So
but still, if you can give a small recap, this one.
Yeah, this is the, I think SQM-1 is a very different standard. I would say it's a overall system of the quality management, unlike the earlier version, wherein you have to set up the policies around those 6 components. And then you prepare policies, and then when inspection happens, then you show, okay, fine, these are the policies which are being followed. But now it's a continuous and an iterative process. Through the control, the firm will have to demonstrate that for every policy or the process, there is a control which is being tested by the firm throughout the year. And that at the end of the year, the annual evaluation has to be carried out. So it's a continuous testing and overall system, which is very different from the SQC-1, which was a mere bunch of, probably some of the firms were using it as a mere bunch of policies being followed on those 6 components. Yeah.
Okay. One user has asked, how will these revised standards SQM1, SQM2, and SA220 revised affect other standards of auditing?
Okay, so there are
Is it a
some
comprehensive change, or just these are new applicable standards only, or these will have a overall effect on other standards also?
So there will be some small amendments which may happen at the other places, right? Currently, as SQC-1 is referred, or wherever the EQR is referred, now the references will be updated. But if you look at the other bunch of standards in auditing, those are when you perform those engagements on at the particular engagement level. But here it's talking about the quality of the engagement, quality of the firm as a whole. So yes, there are going to be some other confirming amendments which may happen because of the references and because of the requirements of the EQR, or because of the enhanced SA220 requirements.
And there is one question which even I don't understand. Please show and explain some illustrative examples on FRAP for audit service line.
For audit service
line.
FRAP.
Services. FRAP. Even I don't understand what he's
maybe
asking.
Risk assessment process they are asking.
Maybe, yeah, firm risk assessment procedure. Yeah, I think that's the question.
So that's what I'm saying. Maybe it will be good if you can just go to the ISSB website and look for the implementation guide of the ISQM-1, because as I said, the standard is very much aligned and converged with the ISQM-1. So my request is everyone should read this exposure draft and give the comments, because these can be addressed by ISSB before issuance.
Sure. And Amit sir, what is the extent of involvement of EQCR shall have during the engagement? What is the extent of involvement of the engagement quality reviewer, and whether the engagement quality reviewer is required to be involved throughout the audit period from planning to conclusion, or only at the time of conclusion? If throughout the period, then how should the firm document the same?
So I think the expectations is very clear now. The EQR needs to develop his own comfort. He needs to be, even as per standard also, he needs to be involved all through in all the 3 stages: planning, execution, and completion. And then he holds the responsibility of ensuring that sufficient work has been performed by the engagement team. The engagement partner has spent sufficient time. There is enough documentation sitting in the file for him to be comfortable. There is enough work done by the engagement team on significant judgments and significant matters. And then the report that has been issued meets the quality standards of the firm. So there is a huge responsibility sitting on his head. The more he is involved in the audit, the better it is. And obviously, he is not part of the audit team. This is clear. So it's an independent oversight over the audit team and the engagement partner. So he needs to be significantly involved, let's put it, less than the engagement partner, far less than the engagement partner, because he's not actually performing the audit. But because he holds significant responsibilities, better. And even if you look at the regulatory reviews, regulatory orders, they've not spared EQR either. I mean, which clearly means that responsibility is more or less similar. I mean, I'll not say equal, but responsibilities are there to
Yes, there.
EQR.
If I go further, one step further than this on my own regard, whenever an engagement quality reviewer partner comes and engages, reviews the whole engagement, we have the one step we learn in our whole auditing process is materiality. The materiality level needs to be set at the start of the engagement. So
Yeah.
whenever an EQR comes, he sets up his own materiality levels, or he has to rely on the materiality which was made up by the engagement team.
No. So if he is involved at the time of planning, so this is his consensus that this is the materiality, and there are bases as to how that materiality is worked out, and the basis also includes some type of sensitivity, which means that had the engagement team taken materiality basis revenue, this would have been the amount. Had the engagement team taken PBT as the basis, and then some sensitivity as to should we take 8%, 9%. So this is the kind of documentation which is expected to be prepared and then reviewed and cleared by both the engagement partner and the EQR at the time of planning itself.
Okay. So another question which has come up is: are there any restrictions on the certain types of services the outgoing auditor can't give to the client other than the statutory audit on account of rotation?
The outgoing auditors,
I think they are
there are
banned for 3
restrictions
years,
and
right? Yeah, they are. I think they are not allowed to give any services for, I think, 3 to 5 years.
I
That's
think
what
once
I am.
you are out of the audit and there is another auditor, then I mean, it depends on the if companies or the audit committees may want to hold, like banks have a restriction cooling off period of 3 years or 6 years.
Yes.
That is a different story. But I think the companies, if not mandated internally, then once you're out of it, then Section 144 technically doesn't apply. What do you think, Deepa?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to check the requirement of the regulation, because depending on the company and the sector in which it is, as you rightly pointed out, that Companies Act talks about the cooling off period while before being appointed as an auditor, but they have no restriction on the non-audit services once you're out. So yeah, but one has to be careful and thorough with the regulations governing the company.
So the last question of the day, which I can find, is: are there any threshold limits for application of the standards with reference to MSME sector enterprises, or there are separate considerations for SME firms doing non-listed entity audits?
I think this question was answered by Rajiv in the beginning. The standard is applicable to all three standards whenever issued, but there are principles or there are guidelines for scalability. So, for example, the quality risk can be tailored to the firm. The responses can be limited. Some of the processes, for example, review and supervision, depending on the number and size of the engagement, that may not be required. One person may be responsible for the overall implementation as well as the operational and the accountability. So depending on the engagement, depending on the firm size, that can be scalable. But the standard is applicable to all the size of the firm. And there are examples in the application material that demonstrate how to apply aspects of the standard to less complex and more complex firms. So you can refer to the application material also.
So are there any more questions, Adilji? Or we are done?
No, sir, we are through with the questions.
Okay. So I think we're at the end of session now. So once again, I would like to thank the AASB board, the chairman, C.S. Sanjeev Singhal, the vice chairman, P. Vishal Doshi ji, and Anil ji, and also the learned speakers. Deepa Agarwal ji, Amit Mitra ji, and also Rajiv Saxena ji in his absentia. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to be the moderator of this session. And if there are any further more queries, you can mail to the AASB board email, and they will definitely help you in getting the resolution for the same. And now I hand over the stage again to Anilji.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much on behalf of AASB of ICI for sparing your valuable time, for acceding to our request and co-hosting this webinar, as well as sparing your whole 2.5 hours with us and moderating this webinar. On behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my heartiest thanks to the Honorable Chairman C.A. Vasu Agarwal ji, Ludhiana Branch Chairman, for sparing the valuable time. Also, I am extend my heartiest thanks towards all the three speakers, C. Rajiv Saxena ji in his absentia, C. Amit Mitra ji and Madam Deepa Agarwal ji, for sparing their valuable time and enlighten all of us on SQM-1, SQM-2 and SA-220 revise. I also extend my warm heartiest thanks towards C. Rohit Tuatia ji in his absentia for his keynote address. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.